Greetings, BSM TV viewers around all the world. We welcome you once again to another session on this very channel where we look at issues which are so important to our salvation. With me here is Pastor Dube. Welcome.
Thank you. We also thank God for allowing us to be here together.
We're going to look at an interesting issue which I think is of great importance because it's been widely discussed and debated in various circles. The issue of flesh eating. Some people say there's no morality involved, it doesn't affect our spirituality, while others feel it does. Some think it's only for health reasons. We would like to understand, is it really a sin to eat flesh?
Okay, so thank you so much. We'd like to invite all the viewers to take up their Bibles and even also their SOP references so that we enjoy. For that wonderful question, we have a very, very important point, because we hear even from SOP, there is this instruction which says, 7T page 126, which says, some after adopting a vegetarian diet return to the use of flesh. So it's saying, because it happens that people, after having heard all this truth, they've understood the issue of health reform or the issue of flesh eating, which we are to discuss today. Some tend to then follow the light. But when after following the light, they come to many things that comes in their lives, they turn back to eating what? Flesh. So what inspiration says, this is foolish indeed, and reveals the lack of knowledge of how to prepare proper food in place of meat. So inspiration is saying, when one returns back to eating of flesh, you are actually doing a very foolish indeed what? Idea. So this then intends that there is something that he has to do with the sinning, as you have asked, is there where sin? So at first I will first define what sin is so that we can go together. So when we go to GC or 1 John 3 verse 4 and Romans 3 verse 20 or GC 4:6-7, what does it say? The first step?
The first step in reconciliation to God is the conviction of sin.
So when we talk about the sin being involved maybe in eating of flesh, the first point is we must be convicted. Unless we are convicted, then there is no reconciliation with what? With God.
Sin is the transgression of the law.
Right?
By the law is the knowledge of sin.
So we have no other definition than that sin is the transgression of the law. And it's also for by the knowledge of the law, we know what sin is. So meaning there are two things involved in sinning. There is the aspect of breaking the law, and there is also the issue of knowledge. Do you have any knowledge about what you are doing? Meaning someone may actually break the law and there be no sin because the person does not know the law. So we are talking about a very important aspect that when we say flesh eating is to do with sin, then it must be shown from the scriptures, shown from God which law is violated. I'm sure you can go down even also to WV page 73 paragraph 5, WV 73 paragraph 5, the second aspect in sin.
Said the angel,
right.
If light come and that light is set aside or rejected, then comes condemnation,
right,
and the frown of God. But before the light comes, there is no sin, for there is no light for them to reject.
This is the second aspect that we're talking about. We're not talking about definition of sin. There must be a law broken, and there must be also light that has come in reference to the subject. Then if there is light that has come in reference, and you now know how the law of God is broken, and then you choose to follow that which is not in the law of God, then we're told here, that's when sin comes. So before light comes, there is no sin. You will realize that as we go in this subject, there will be many people, or there are many people who tend to refer to say, how about those who live at this time, they were eating flesh, how about that one? But they don't consider that there is the aspect of the revelation of the light. Because when the light is there and you reject the light, then you commit what? Sin. So sin is committed in these two aspects, breaking the law, when you now have the light patterning the law.
Interesting there. So from the very beginning, is there any light which God gave concerning the diet?
Right. Well, yes, there is light because the word of God brings that light to us. We shall check in Genesis chapter 1, verse 29 and 30 to hear the light that God gave. This was the first light that God communicated to man after he created man. God said to man, you shall replenish the what, subdue this earth and be fruitful and multiply. But after that one, God also gave them light as pertaining to what they were to eat. Let's hear what he said. Genesis 1, verse 29 and 30.
And God said, Behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in the which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed.
Right.
To you it shall be for meat. And to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for meat. And it was so.
So this is God when he was creating this, when he had created this man and even also the beast. He comes to the beast and say to man, this is the type of food that you are going to eat. I'm sure you've seen every herb bearing what? Seed upon this earth, and every fruit tree yielding seed shall be for meat. So for them, there wasn't, when he says shall be for meat, we then learn here that in this KJV version, when say meat, it doesn't refer to flesh, definitely, or to the food from animal, but it's referring to just food in general. So we are learning here that the food that God gave Adam and Eve, the light that he gave, was that they eat no animal food. Not only did God stop there, we have seen in verse 30, he even also told the animals that they should also not eat one another. So there was no killing, there was no eating of what? Of one another when God created this earth. So the reason is very, very clear, because when you now compare the difference between a flesh diet and also a seed diet, you see that when you are eating flesh, or when you take, for example, flesh and you put it on the ground, and you take a seed, you put it on the ground, you put the necessary conditions, and then you come and check even maybe after a week, and so you find that the flesh would have gone back to the ground, but the seed comes back into life. Meaning, when you eat flesh already when it's dead. But when you are eating a seed, you eat it while it's alive. Meaning, the life that is in the seed, God wanted that life to be to perpetuate the life of a human being. So God was not interested in seeing people eating dead things, because they were supposed to have life as is the life of God. So the life as the life of God can only be perpetuated by eating the living things. So we even see in CCH 229 paragraph 1, CCH 229 paragraph 1,
those who eat flesh are but eating grains and vegetables at second hand.
So this is what it is. So God did not want that, for people to eat vegetables and grains at second hand. They were supposed to take it at first.
For the animal receives from these things the nutrition that produces growth. The life that was in the grains and vegetables passes into the eater.
Right.
We receive it by eating the flesh of the animal. How much better to get it direct by eating the food that God provided for our use.
So that was the idea of God, that man should not be a secondary eater, but should be a first eater, get life directly from the plants. So that was God's plan, or the light that he gave pertaining the eating aspect in the beginning.
So obviously, if the diet of man didn't involve animal flesh, the same with the animal's diet, then it means no one or nothing was supposed to die. But we do see that at some point death came into the world. What happened there?
That's a very, very wonderful question, especially in reference to this. So it means that when you observe that when God had created man, and man was in the perfect plan of God, we have seen that there was no death of an animal or death of a beast. But death of a man. But what really caused this death? We remember the commandment that God gave and said, if you shall eat this, thou shalt surely die. And we know when they ate, they felt on appetite, and they ate that which God had said they should not they should not eat. Death then entered into both the human family. But the first to die was not a human family. What was it? There was a law that God instituted on behalf of men. Let's see SR, Story of Redemption, page 15, paragraph 1. It says, when Adam, right? Can you see it? When Adam, all right, let me take it while you are checking it. When Adam, according to God's special directions, made an offering for sin, it was him it was to him a most painful ceremony. His hand must be raised to take life, which God alone could give, and make an offering for sin. It was the first time he had witnessed death, and as he looked upon the fleeting victim writhing in the agonies of death, he was to look forward by faith to the Son of God, whom the victim prefigured, who was to die as a sacrifice for man. So this is what story of redemption is saying. When Adam first viewed death, it was because of his sin. So heaven provided a means and a way for the removal of Adam's sin, and that remedy required the killing of an animal. So it was a painful ceremony to Adam to behold death, because he had never beheld death. But he knew that the reason why I'm seeing this death is because of my sin. So the first thing to die when men sinned, it was an animal representing Christ, who was to die for the sin of the world. We even see it in Story of Redemption 50 paragraph 2. I'm sure you've seen it.
As Adam was slaying the innocent victim.
Right.
Sorry, can I take it again?
Right.
As Adam was slaying the innocent victim, it seemed to him that he was shedding the blood of the Son of God by his own hand.
So you see what it was when Adam was killing that first animal. He didn't just enjoy seeing the death, but it was impressed in his mind that what you're actually doing, you are killing the Son of God. So this is when the death came in. So the first death to come in was that of a beast, but representing the death of what? Of the Son of what? Of God. He
knew that if he had remained steadfast to God and true to his holy law, there would have been no death of beast nor of man.
You see? So there would have been no death of beast or man. Yet
in the sacrificial offerings, pointing to the great and perfect offering of God's dear Son, there appeared a star of hope to illuminate the dark and terrible future and relieve it of its utter hopelessness and ruin.
Right. For the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life through Jesus Christ. So that's what was impressed to Adam at first. So the dying of that animal was impressing. We read in Genesis chapter 3 that God clothed them with the skin of that animal. So that's why we have the first death being recorded. It was the death of an animal as a result of Adam breaking the law of God. So when Adam broke the law of God, and we have now this death of animals were not just being done randomly. They were coming from a law that God gave. So there was a law which regulated how these animals were to die, so that they can point forward to Christ, so that men can be redeemed. So we hear about that law in Story of Redemption, page 145, because some think God's law started in the days of Moses. No. We see that God had a law which governed the angels in heaven. This is why we say Satan fell. He fell because he could not keep the law of what? Of God. So that law is the one that was handed down to Adam, and Adam failed on the what? On the law. When he failed on the law, then heaven went on to provide a law which was then had to do with the killing of animals for the redemption of man. Let's hear that in Story of Redemption. Page 145.
The law of God existed before man was created.
So before man was created, there was the law of God.
The angels were governed by it.
Right.
Satan fell because he transgressed the principles of God's government.
So that's it. That's why we see in the Garden of Eden, God say, "Thou shalt not eat this." It was the law of God, being given to man, and Satan fell from this law of God. After
Adam and Eve were created,
right,
God made known to them his law. It was not then written, but was rehearsed to them by Jehovah. So
that Adam and Eve were in that state that they were only told, this is the law of God, all these aspects, and they fell from the law of God. Can you quote down where it says, this is Story of Redemption 145 paragraph 2, it says, after Adam's sin and fall.
After Adam's sin and fall, nothing was taken from the law of God.
So when Adam sinned, nothing was taken from the law of what? Of God. He fell on the law of God, but God could not take away his law. But what happened? The
The
principles?
principles of the Ten Commandments existed before the fall and were of a character suited to the condition of a holy order of beings.
Exactly. So how they were structured when God gave them to Adam before he fell, they were such that they are for an unfallen what? Being.
After the fall, the principles of those precepts were not changed, but
Right.
additional precepts were given to meet man in his
So
fall.
this is what God happened. So this is what happened. So when Adam fell, heaven came in and provided additional principles. What about these additional principles? So that they can aid man in his fallen condition.
Mhm.
So in these additional precepts, that's when we have this law that required the death of the animal on the very day that Adam had sinned. Yeah? So, and when Adam was killing it, because of this law, he was really understanding that I'm really killing the Son of what? Of God. Right? Can you take it away? A system was then established.
A system was then established requiring the sacrificing of beasts
Mhm.
to keep before fallen man that which the serpent made Eve disbelieve,
Right?
that the penalty of disobedience is death.
So remember, the serpent said, you shall not really die to Eve. But God made it very clear by that killing of that first animal, it was impressed upon the mind of Adam that the wages of sin is what? Is death. So how was this to be impressed? Not by the law which existed before the fall, but by this additional law of the system of sacrifices and offerings of the beast, as well as the what? Of the animals. So this is what was introduced, resulting in the death of what? Of animals. Maybe can you take it down where it says, if the law of God had not been transgressed.
If the law of God had not been transgressed, there never would have been death, and there would have been no need of additional precepts to suit man's fallen condition.
So your question, I'm sure, is answered that the death of an animal or the death of the beast came as a result of the additional, especially of animal, additional precepts which were to suit man in his fallen what? Condition to keep the law of God. Meaning the law of God could not be kept without this system that God had initiated in what? In Eden.
So I would like to know, as far as the system is concerned, was there a distinction between clean and unclean animals? I'm sure there's been discussion around that.
Yes, there's been a discussion around that because many people think that the animals were clean, they were clean for food. But we really want to see what did this law really say about the cleanness of animals. Right, can we go to Genesis chapter 7, verse 1 and 4? Genesis chapter 7, verse 1 to 4, but we just read 1 or 2 points there in the days of Noah, right?
And the Lord said unto Noah,
Mhm.
Come thou and all thy house into the ark,
Right.
for thee have I seen righteous before me in this generation.
Uh-huh.
Of every clean beast thou shalt take to thee by sevens, the male and his female,
Mhm.
and of beasts that are not clean by two, the male and his female.
So you see, God is talking to Noah and he's saying to Noah, Noah, you should take clean beasts and you should take those who are also unclean. Noah is not questioning as to what is clean and what's not clean. Why? Because Noah, according to the law that God had provided, Noah should have been knowing what is clean and what is not unclean. Why? Because at that particular time, as we shall want to understand, people who lived at that particular time in the days of Noah, before the flood, the instruction was clear from God that they were not eating what? Flesh. Because when we read when Adam fell, inspiration says to Adam, thou shalt continue to eat the herb of the what? Of the field. So Adam continued to eat the herb of the field even close up to the time of the after the flood. Let's just hear a little bit about that one in CD 147 paragraph 2. The inhabitants of the antediluvian world.
The inhabitants of the antediluvian world were intemperate in eating and drinking. They would have flesh meats, although God had at that time given man no permission to eat.
So you see, before the flood, God had given no permission to eat what? Flesh food. So it meant that when we are talking about the clean of animals, it had nothing to do with eating. Because at that particular time, God had not given them an instruction for them to eat what? Flesh. So we see that these animals, therefore, that were clean, they were not really clean just for food, but they were made clean by this law so that they could be sacrificed to represent who? Christ. Let's just see a little bit there.
They ate and drank till the indulgence of their depraved appetite knew no bounds, and they became so corrupt that God could bear with them no longer.
So that's what happened in those inhabitants of the world. So the cleanliness of animals was detected by this law that God gave, the law of sacrifices and offerings, because they were clean only to be used for the purpose of what? Of representing what? Christ. Because we are seeing them clean even well before man was given to eat what? Flesh.
So when was man actually given the permission to go ahead and eat these clean animals? And was there any effect on man from that?
Yes, that's a good question, because we realize that when men sinned, this then is what then happened. We've seen the order. God didn't give him a permission to eat, but he allowed the killing of what? Of animals. So, but we have seen that animals was a result of this law, so that it represents the death of what? Of Christ, which was to redeem man. So in Genesis chapter 9 verse 3, that's where we find God giving men to eat flesh. This was after the flood. I'm sure you understand what had happened during the flood. All the greens and the fruits and the rest of the things had been destroyed during the flood. Then God gave them a permission to eat those clean animals. Maybe let's hear in Genesis 9 verse 3.
Every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you.
Right.
Even as the green herb have I given you all things.
So God is saying, even as the green herb, because they were eating the green herb prior to that. So he's now saying, now I'm giving you flesh also to eat. So we see this type of flesh that he gave them. It is the issue of those clean animals, as we shall see. After the flood. This is CCH 228, paragraph 2.
After the flood, the people ate largely of animal food. God saw that the ways of man were corrupt, and that he was disposed to exalt himself proudly against his Creator, and to follow the inclinations of his own heart. So after the flood, we are now told that then people, as God gave them the permission to eat flesh, they then ate largely of animal food. Why did God allow that to happen? God is saying to them, he saw that people were corrupt, and they were disposed to exalt himself proudly against what? God. So what did he do? He permitted, and he permitted. And he permitted that long-lived race to eat animal food to shorten their sinful lives.
So the reason why God permitted them to eat the flesh, it was because he wanted to shorten their sinful life. Because he knew that, for example, if your parents, your grandparents are still alive today, with all the knowledge which they have learned in doing that which is evil, imagine what will happen, how they educate the world in the things of evil. So it's actually mercy of God to lay down those grandparents and the rest to the grave, so that they die with their evil ideas and plans which they can pass from generation to generation. So God in his mercy, he had to cut short these the antediluvian, those who lived after the flood, because he beheld the evil which they were having. But how was he going to that? He allowed them to eat animal food. So animal food had a part in their lives because it cut short their lives. You can check even the numbers. Before the flood, they were living 900 days. This year's 300, 700 years. But after the flood, you don't see even a record except Noah of someone who lived 200 years and above. Why? They were now eating this. What are they saying?
Soon after the flood, the race began to rapidly decrease in size and in length of years.
So even when Adam is to awake today and is shown the race which is now on earth, you may even run away from some people and you will be told, no, these are still your kids. You'll ask, why are these things? God will tell him, they have continued to eat the animal food and it has shortened their lives. So those who think themselves are tall and are big, you are nothing compared to what it was, as long as you continue to eat flesh. So it's a wonder, a mystery as to what we are seeing on this earth, because of the diet which then was allowed after the flood.
Yeah, quite interesting, quite clear. So is there some way actually where the different types of clean and unclean animals are stated which were given?
Yes. That's a good, because what you are saying is exactly what we have talked about. That in Genesis they were allowed to eat clean animals, but it's not clearly written in Genesis that they were eating clean animals. But when you also reason even from your own mind, you see that there were how many animals only which were unclean? Two. So if they eat one animal, eat any of the unclean animals, the unclean animals are going to go to extinction, because there were only 2 preserved for unclean animals, but 7 for clean animals, for that purpose, for the sacrificial purposes, and even also for them to eat. So God then had to continue with this law. This same law which he gave to Adam was then written clearly by Moses, specifying what is clean and what is unclean. And this one is a common chapter which is loved by people. When you talk about the subject, they will quote the common chapter. Even a child can quote the common chapter, and that is Leviticus chapter 11. From this, we just read 1 or 2 points from there.
Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, These are the beasts which ye shall eat among all the beasts that are on the earth. Whatsoever parteth the hoof, and is cloven-footed, and cheweth the cud, among the beasts that shall ye eat.
So this chapter, following the same law that God gave of Adam, it then defined clearly what was to be eaten and what was not to be eaten. And you see, everything that God said must be eaten is in line with the sacrifices. Whatever was to be eaten could be used for sacrifices. But if something was not to be eaten, that same thing could not be used for sacrifices. So the main point here, the deciding point, was the law that God added when Adam fell, which was the law of the system of sacrifices and offerings. So usually people run to this law and they love it so much, but they leave the rest of the aspects of this law. We were given flesh to it. Yes, the Leviticus 11. Yeah, why are you saying this? The Bible says this, but the same Bible, they then don't consider in length what the same law said pertaining that the aspect of animals to be eaten and not to be eaten. We are seeing that the animals usually God is clear, them that cheweth the cud, and them that divided the wolf. Similarly on the fish and on the fowls, in verse 13, what does it say?
And these are they which ye shall have an abomination among the fowls. They shall not be eaten. They are an abomination.
Right.
The eagle and the ossifrage.
So he also told them, pertaining to everything that flies, and even those that are in the waters, these shall all that eat in the waters. Verse 9.
This shall ye eat of all that are in the waters, whatsoever hath fins and scales in the waters.
Very, very clear. We cannot finish on that aspect. It's a common chapter because people like to eat meat holding to that chapter.
So what was the significance of these clean animals?
Yes, the clean animals, as we partly said it, they were really showing the Son of God who was going to come and die and redeem men out of what? Of bondage, of sin. So they indicated that even when the Son of Man shall come, he needs to be eaten by the what? By the what? Eaten by the what? By the people, for them to have life. When God gave these animals as clean for them to eat. So you see in Leviticus chapter 17, verse 10 and 11, something peculiar in the life of these animals. God, yes, gave them to eat flesh, but the life of the animals was very peculiar. They were not supposed to tamper with it. Why? Because that's where you're asking. It was representing the life of the Son of God who was to come and die for us. Leviticus 17, verse 10 and 11 says that.
And whatsoever man there be of the house of Israel, or of the strangers that sojourn among you, that eateth any manner of blood, I will even set my face against that soul that eateth blood, and will cut him off from among his people.
Right.
For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you upon the altar to make an atonement for your souls. For it is the blood that maketh an atonement for the soul.
So God is coming up very clear. What makes an atonement for the sin is what? Is the blood. So the life of every animal was critical before God. No one was supposed to eat it or tamper around it, because that life represented the life of what? Of the Son of what? Of God. So if one had eaten blood, which people usually do among the Gentiles, what do? Or among the people, they kill an animal and then they take a container and take up that blood and then start cooking the blood, and they eat the blood and say it's nice. But what is really nice is you're actually eating your own life, because God was saying this is not to be eaten. And many studies have even shown why, even that if you eat blood, you're actually eating a lot of diseases that will not come into that. But what I'm saying is the blood was representing the life of the Son of God. Therefore, it was not to be tampered with. So while God gave them a permission as to what to eat, he was careful about the life of the animal. Why? Because it represents the life of what? Of Christ.
Were there specifics concerning how these animals were to be killed?
Yes, there were specifics, because the issue here, the same law which we have come was told us what they were not to eat blood. These are the animals that are to eat. And even also he had to specify, as you are asking, how they were to be killed. You see, many people run to Leviticus 11, but they don't think about that you don't eat an animal alive. You need to kill the animal. So they don't look for a law which regulates how the animal was to be killed, so that they are left without a sin before God. Because we have seen the life of an animal was very critical. So let's see Leviticus 17, verse 1 to 5. Let's see what it says pertaining the killing.
And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto Aaron, and unto his sons, and unto all the children of Israel, and say unto them, This is the thing which the Lord hath commanded, saying,
Right.
What man soever there be of the house of Israel that killeth an ox, or lamb, or goat in the camp, or that killeth it out of the camp.
So do you see the animals that God gave a command pertaining here? What are they? Ox, lamb, goat. These are the clean animals that we have seen in Leviticus chapter 11. So God is saying, anyone who kills this, either you have killed it in the camp or outside the camp, there was one law. What was the law?
And bringeth it not unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation to offer an offering unto the Lord before the tabernacle of the Lord, blood shall be imputed unto that man.
Right.
Shed blood, and that man shall be cut off from among his people. This
person has not killed a person. I'm sure you are saying he has not murdered a person. But what has he actually killed? Animal, ox, the very things that God said should be eaten. But God is saying, if you kill these things, what about the life of them? What was the life? It's the blood. So God said, when you kill an ox, when you kill an animal, when you kill a goat, then take care of the life of that animal. How do you take care of it? You come with it and present it as a sacrifice before what? Before God. Then you are clear of the blood of an animal. But other than that, you are considered as one who has shed blood. What is to shed blood? In simpler terms, is to kill. You are considered as one who has committed murder. And what about if you have committed murder? What should be done? You also cut off from the house of Israel. So the house of Israel knew that when God said flesh, they didn't just run to flesh. They would think also on the law which regulated how the animal was killed. Because if you didn't play a right in this, you were considered as a breaker of the commandments of what? Of God. And you see, you will be actually worthwhile to be removed from the house of what? Of Israel. What does it say in finishing? To the end?
To the end that the children of Israel may bring their sacrifices which they offer in the open field, even that they may bring them unto the Lord, unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, unto the priest, and offer them for peace offerings unto the Lord.
So you can't confuse this. This type of sacrifice which God was talking about here is called peace offerings. So you will find that as we go, many people might have the questions. No, those who used to eat sacrifices were priests. Yes, you are correct. The priest will eat what was called sin offering. But when anyone among the children of Israel wanted to know how to kill this and to have something to eat, then they would offer what was called a peace offering. So it could be offered in the open field, as the scripture said. It could be offered in the tabernacle, wherever it could be offered. But the important point was the blood of that animal. It should be brought before the Lord, to acknowledge before the Lord that I have shed life. And once you acknowledge, then God releases you from the condemnation using this law which he ordained when Adam fell.
See. We've touched on the specifics of how the animal was to be slaughtered. What were the expectations? How about in terms of eating?
It's very interesting. This law did not leave the stone unturned. Why? Because it told them what was clean. It told them how to kill it. It also told them how to eat it. You see, when you talk of people today, when you talk of flesh eating, how people eat flesh, they just eat anyhow. They don't think that there is a law that regulates how you are supposed to eat. So, as we indicated, there is sin in that, because when there is a law that says you should eat this way and you don't follow that law, then you are committing sin. If the law says you should kill the animal this way and you kill it the way you like it, then you are committing what? Sin. So there is sin that is involved in these very things that people are not careful about. Let's see what it says there, in Leviticus 19 verse 5 to 8.
If you offer a sacrifice of peace offerings unto the Lord,
right?
You shall offer it at your own
Take
will.
note, this is not sin offering. They are not to offer sin offering at their own will. No. Because when you sin, there is no more any of your will say, I'm offering this sacrifice, because no, now you have sinned, you will die if you don't do that. But if ever they wanted to do a peace offering, or you feel like you have to eat something, then you do it at your own will. And that type of sacrifice is called a peace offering.
Okay.
Right? Let's go ahead.
It shall be eaten the same day you offer it, and on the morrow.
Right?
And if aught remain unto the third day, it shall be burnt in the fire.
So God was clear. He knew why they were offering a peace offering. They want to eat it. So he's telling them, how should you eat it? You eat it on the same day, second day, but the third day, if anything remains, you shall burn it with what? With fire. Right? Let's go ahead.
And if it be eaten at all on the third day, it is abominable. It shall not be accepted.
So you see, if at all it be eaten on the third day, it is abominable, and it shall not be accepted. Let's hear more.
Therefore, everyone that eateth it shall bear his iniquity.
Do you see that? Anyone who would eat that animal after the third day, you are bearing sin and iniquity. And what will happen? And the person will be, he has profaned the whole thing, and that soul shall be cut off from these people. So there was cutting off for eating blood. There was cutting off for just killing the animal, not the proper way that God has given. There was cutting off for eating the flesh, not in the way that God has prescribed, according to his way. So there was, when God gave them flesh, it was gutted, how it is to be eaten. Not this that we see where people put flesh up, they dry it and it stays for years, and they say for months, and they even put it in fridges, they've bought fridge and do this thing. This is a hidden way out of the common order of things. And because so, if you eat after the third day, you're actually bearing your what? Your iniquity. So it's not just about eating, it's about following. And that sense the Lord. So God guided them so that people have no sin in eating flesh. So you can quickly see, before we even go further, that in eating flesh, there was so much sin that was involved if one was not careful. That was worthy of cutting a person off from Israel. Not just to leave you, but to be cut off. So that's what God gave pertaining eating what flesh. That's what this law, additional law, which was given to Adam, yet in place for those who ate flesh. This is why this law was lifted from the days of Adam up until which time? After the flood. So Adam did not have much about this to know that you have to kill the animal. He knew I have to kill this animal this way, but how to eat it, there was no need for them at that particular time. It came after the days of Noah.
So we're seeing that it was well laid out how to go about all this, but I'm sure what people do nowadays is highly different.
Exactly.
I believe the Israelites had troubles as well in terms of flesh eating when they left Egypt and while they were in the wilderness.
That's very true. You see, the worldly way of eating flesh makes it very nice. The way they think people, it's what is nice. And even the Israelites, remember, they were in Egypt, so they were accustomed in eating the way the heathens will eat what? Flesh. But now when God is saying, this is the way in which you shall eat what? Flesh, then they obviously they're having problems. This is why when we go in Numbers chapter 11, we see them crying for flesh and saying, you have only given us manna, but we don't see, we see that God did not only give them manna. Yes, they give them manna, but they were having their animal sacrifice, in which God has said, if you wished, you do it this way. So they were not willing to follow what God provided, in as much as no one is willing to follow today. So what happened? They cried to the Lord. Numbers 11, verse 4.
And the mixed multitude that was among them fell a-lusting, and the children of Israel also wept again and said, who shall give us flesh to eat? We remember the fish we did eat in Egypt freely.
Right.
The cucumbers and the melons and the leeks and the onions and the garlic.
Right?
But now our soul is dried away. There is nothing at all beside this manna before our eyes.
You see, they are despising manna, but I'm sure you can see that there wasn't manna only in front of them. They had been given sacrifices. So they kept on. But they were not willing to follow the Lord's prescribed way. And they are saying, what is before our eyes? It's what? It's manna. This what? This manna. But what was manna? Which they were despising, right? Psalm 78, verse 24-25.
And had rained down manna upon them to eat, and had given them of the corn of heaven.
Mm-hmm.
Men did eat angels' food.
Right.
He sent them meat to the full.
So men ate angels' what? Food. So manna was angels' food, meaning the angels was eaten from the days of Adam. We saw that the diet in heaven consisted only of what this we're having is in terms of what? The grains. So they were given angels' food, but they despised the angels' food. Not only did they despise the angels' food, but even the way God had told them how they can have what? Meat. So the result then was that they said, we want flesh in our own way. Right, let's see what they did. Numbers chapter 11, verse 32 and 34.
And the people stood up all that day and all that night and all the next day, and they gathered the quails.
Mm-hmm.
He that gathered least gathered 10 omers.
Right.
And they spread them all abroad for themselves round about the camp.
I'm sure you can see after gather. Instead, God could have said, you have cattle, you have animals, just kill the way you like and eat. He could have said that. They had everything in the wilderness. But God is not saying that. What is he bringing? Quails. But when the quails come, look, are they following any order of that law of the Leviticus? They are gathering, he's saying, you that gathered at least 10 homers. So it meant these 10 homers were not to be eaten one day. I'm sure you can see. Neither were they to be eaten the second day. They wanted to eat even the whole month or even years. The heathen way. So, despising the clear commands that God has put even in front of them. So, this angered the Lord. And those who lasted for that flesh in the wilderness, in this way, they were buried. Let's hear more. Verse 33.
And while the flesh was yet between their teeth,
right.
ere it was chewed, the wrath of the Lord was kindled against the people,
right.
And the Lord smote the people with a very great plague. And he called the name of that place Kibroth Hattaavah, because there they buried the people that lasted.
So all the people that lasted in the wilderness wanted this flesh in the Egyptian way, in the worldly way, they all perished. Mind you, do you think those who are enjoying it this way, will they make it? If they were to make it, then those, when they wake up, they will ask God, why did we perish in the wilderness? It was because of the way they ate what? The flesh. Despising the provisions that God had given in reference to what they were to eat and how to eat it. And we are told that Kibroth Hattaavah is a monument indicating that God will slay those who despise his diet. Who despise the diet of the angels. If you despise the diet of the angels, then what is left for you? Even heaven is not interesting for you. You see people saying, if there is no flesh in heaven, how will I won't think I would rather lose heaven. That's what people say. But I'm telling you, when you get to heaven, you will be given manna, the food of the angels. So if you are saying now, if it means that I should die because of flesh, then you are simply giving your judgment, which is you cannot be taken even to heaven where there is no flesh, because you'll be a problem. You have already given a judgment yourself that if there is no flesh, I'll rather die. So then God provides the death. This is what he did to those in the wilderness. He provided what they asked for, and what they asked for was death. Because when they refused angels' food, where do they want to go? They want to go back to Egypt. So going to Egypt meant death. So that was the issue in the wilderness.
Right, fast forwarding to now beyond the cross.
Right.
What was the difference between what was happening then and after?
Yes, it's very interesting to note, because what we have been talking about now, we're talking about when that Leviticus 11 was given, which people commonly quote. We have said, don't commonly quote Leviticus 11, commonly quote chapter 17, commonly quote chapter 19, so that we are guided. When you say you were given flesh, also tell us about how we were given, how to kill it. When you say we are given also to eat flesh, also tell us about how we are supposed to eat it. So don't quote one thing and move. So this is what was in the Old Testament. But we come to the time, to the period where we are in the what now? In the New Testament era. We want to contrast the what was given to the house of Israel and to us. Let's see the contrast between these two. This is a 1 Corinthians 10, verse 16 to 18.
Cup of blessing which we bless, is it not the communion of the blood of Christ? The bread which we break, is it not the communion of the body of Christ? For we, being many, are one bread and one body, for we are all partakers of that one bread. Behold, Israel after the flesh, are not they which eat of the sacrifices partakers of the altar?
One would have argued and said, no, the Israelites were not eating flesh. But here Paul is coming out clearly and saying, remember the children of Israel, how they were like. When for them to have meat or for them to have food, they were partakers of the altar. But when they were partaking of the altar, those things that they will eat of the altar were pointing to Christ. So they were killing animals here. And see the Old Testament. But in the New Testament, something new has come up. What has come up? We now have who? Christ. So Christ is now not symbolized by the blood of the animals anymore, but now is symbolized by bread and wine. So this is why we said whenever they were eating the animals in the Old Testament, it was pointing even to the New Testament time, that when we also, for us to be saved, we need to eat the body and drink the blood of what? Of Christ. So in the New Testament, we have the blood of Christ, which is bread and wine. Old Testament, we have these animals in which they were killing. So quite clear, even when you keep your Sabbath today, you must have this bread and wine. That's what they will have every Sabbath, remember. Even every new moon, even every other appointed times which God have given them, they would also have these animal sacrifices. But in the new, we no longer have these. What do we have? Bread and wine. Meaning that law which God gave to Adam provided that remedy, that from the time of Adam up to the cross, they will be killing animals. But from the cross going forwards, they will have bread and what? And wine. So what an order God has even for us who live in these last days.
So following from this, are we able to say why the killing of animals ceased at the cross?
Yes, we are able, because when following the law which we talked about, the law which covered how these animals was killed, remember, it made sure that someone is not guilty of animal killing by what? By coming with that blood and acknowledging that we have killed before what? Before God. So let's see the scripture saying why that law had to pass off. Colossians 2 verse 14.
Blotting out the handwriting of ordinances that was against us, which was contrary to us, and took it out of the way, nailing it to his cross.
There was a handwriting of ordinances, or which was, when you read in Numbers 19, this set of ordinances to do with animal sacrifices, as we've indicated. So he's saying this law was against us. In what way was it against us? It required you, for your sin to be forgiven, or even to enjoy flesh, that you must take life, which only God could give. When you take that life, instead of your own life going down, you have the life of the animal in your place, representing the life of what? Of Christ. So this law is termed to be against us. In what way? It required you to kill, as I've indicated. And killing an animal is as good as killing a person in front of God, because you are taking life. This is why God was saying, when you have done that, you have to acknowledge before me, so that I know that life that I have given that animal has been taken off. So this law was against us. This is what even Hebrews 9 verse 9 continues to say.
Which was a figure for the time then present, in which were offered both gifts and sacrifices, that could not make him that did the service perfect, as pertaining to the conscience.
So why could it make him perfect? It was the issue of conscience. When you have sinned, you know that you deserve to die. But instead of you dying, what you have dying? An animal. So when you now have an animal dying in your place, then your heart will be, for my sin, for what I have done, this animal also had to die. But remember, you didn't just kill an animal. It was an innocent animal that did not know anything with your sin. You have done idolatry, you have done everything that you have done and enjoyed your sin. The animal was not there. But you have to take it down and it dies with you. in your place. So this was a painful thing. It was like someone digging a what? A pit to fill another one? Pit. So this is why I say this law was against us, because it involved killing. So you'd kill for you to be forgiven your sins. And this is why I say it could not make people perfect. Which stood
only in meats and drinks and diverse washings and
Mhm.
carnal ordinances,
Mhm.
imposed on them until the time of Reformation.
Right?
For if the blood of bulls and of goats and the ashes of an heifer, sprinkling the unclean, sanctifieth to the purifying of the flesh,
Mhm.
how much more shall the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without spot to God, purge your conscience from dead works to serve the living God?
So it's comparing the system that was in the Old Testament and the system that same law provided for the New Testament. Saying in the New Testament, we now have Christ. We are no longer killing. There is no conscience in you of saying, I have killed. But you remember, though, of course, my sin has killed toward Christ. But you're not being involved in directly killing the lamb as it would. And this is the new and the living way of the Spirit of God, which is bread and wine for the New Testament. So this is what Christ came to provide in place of what? Of the animal sacrifices. For he says, for law, having a shadow of things to come.
For the law, having a shadow of good things to come, and not the very image of the things, can never, with those sacrifices which they offered year by year continually, make the comers thereunto perfect.
So that's the issue. The comers could not be made what? Perfect. Right. So just to finish on that aspect, you can even also read the DA 757, paragraph 1.
Type has met antitype in the death of God's Son. The great sacrifice has been made. The way into the holiest is laid open. A new and living way is prepared for all. No longer need sinful, sorrowing humanity await the coming of the high priest.
Right.
Henceforth, the Savior was to officiate as priest and advocate in the heaven of heavens. It was as if a living voice had spoken to the worshippers. There is now an end to all sacrifices and offerings for sin.
Right. So that's very, very clear. This is what it was like. The death of what? Of Christ caused the close of the aspect. Which aspect? The killing of what? Of animals. So it's very, very clear that it was as if a living voice said there is an end to sacrifices and offerings for what? For sin.
So from what we've been covering so far, and we understand that we would expect that flesh eating would stop after the cross, but is the evidence showing that they continue to eat flesh beyond the cross?
Yes, that's a good question. Because many people then quote what we have explained as we have talked about the animal sacrifices which we are regulating, and they say, if they see at the cross, then we should see people not eating what flesh. Yes, as we shall see from the light that we shall progress with, it should have been so. But because of those people, when you read about even the disciples themselves, we hear Christ saying, I have much to say unto you, but you cannot bear it now. Meaning there was yet much that should have happened by the death of Christ. But that could not be effected in the days of Christ. Because the disciples themselves, remember, they were even doubting even the death of Christ. So they were not in a state of accepting so much things. We even see of the Gentiles, when you read of the Gentiles themselves, they even decided to say, let's cut many things to the Gentiles, because remember the Jerusalem Council. This is what we find in the Jerusalem Council in Acts 15 verse 28, that they still were continuing eating flesh because they couldn't bear much what could have come as a result of the death of Christ. Because the death of Christ was supposed to restore men to perfection. But man was not able to be taken to perfection at that particular time. Let's see a little bit in Acts 15, verse 28 and 29.
For it seemed good to the Holy Ghost and to us to lay upon you no greater burden than these necessary things, that ye abstain from meats offered to idols, and from blood, and from things strangled, and from fornication, from which if ye keep yourselves, ye shall do well. Fare ye well.
Fare ye well. So this is the recommendation which James, through the Holy Ghost, they offered even unto the churches. What was the recommendation here? The recommendation was that this is what they were supposed to do: abstain from the meats offered to what? To idols. That's why I say whenever the Gentiles were following, they were trying to follow a similar system that was in Israel. Whenever they were eating flesh, what would they do? they first offer it to what? To idols. And this is why when we talk of the subject of Christmas, you don't have part in the things they do. They first offer those things to what? To idols. This is why when you read even in Babylon, we read of Daniel, they would not eat the flesh. They knew that this flesh that came before the king was not just eaten, it had first to be offered to idols. As we have seen that even in the house of Israel, that law, commonly that the law should, the sacrifice should be first offered to God, so that they were eating of the sacrifice that has been offered to God. That's how they will eat flesh. So they were told that you now need to take care that you don't do that, even in reference to the Gentiles. And also the things that are strangled and things that are even with blood. Remember, the strangled things are those things that they die. Remember, one uses a cord or what they actually tie until the something dies. So it dies with the blood within it. So it's called a strangled thing. And these things were not to be eaten. So it means that if it was not strangled, they would eat. If it was not with blood, they would eat. If it was not offered to idols, they would eat. So, meaning they continued eating flesh after the cross. And it's clear why it says that the Holy Ghost seemed necessary for them. For it's so that they were not able to bear what the whole tenor of what was supposed to be there by the death of what? Of Christ. Inasmuch as the apostles were not able.
So, since the event of the cross didn't bring about the immediate restoration of the Edenic diet, when did that come concerning the diet?
Yes, that's a very, very powerful aspect that we really need to do, because we have said the death of Christ was supposed to bring men back to the Edenic state, but men were not able to be brought back to the Edenic state at that particular time. So the aspect of bringing men back to the Edenic state comes, this aspect of flesh eating, we will see that it comes under the third angel's message. But let us check the order of the things coming from Eden right up to our time. We read in Ezekiel 26 verse 21 verse 26 and 27. Thus says the Lord.
Thus saith the Lord, remove the diadem and take off the crown. Exalt him that is low and abase him that is high.
Right.
I will overturn, and it shall be. And it shall be no more until he come whose right it is, and I will give it him.
So here we are seeing the progress of the kingdoms as we are going step by step. So we saw that the crown, or the power that of ruling that God, the dominion that God gave to Adam to rule this earth. Adam himself, as we shall, maybe let's read a little bit, or let me read this quote before I make that comment. It says here, this is HHTL, page 349, paragraph 3. It says here, the sins, says the prophet, of the cities of the plain were fullness of bread and idleness. Effeminacy, luxury destroyed Rome, when all the arms of surrounding nations could not do it in their primitive days. And when they did not number a quarter so many as they bore to the yoke after the days of the emperor. Alexander the Great, while practicing the plain and the simple rules of temperance, was invincible to all toils of war, but was finally conquered by giving way to his own appetite. I'm sure you can see, when these kingdoms were moving from one kingdom to another, the thing that was the major point in which caused the fall of many of these kingdoms was what? Was appetite. Adam lost the first dominion because of appetite. Come the second dominion, which was the Babylonian dominion, they lost also because of appetite. What do we hear about it? They ate and drank wine in the vessels of God, meaning their appetite knew no bounds. And this is what it says of Belshazzar, what it calls, say, they saw a hand saying, mene, mene, tekel upharsin. It was because of their uncontrolled appetite. We see the same thing in the Medo-Persian kingdoms. And then we see the same thing in the Grecian kingdom, Alexander the Great. It is said that he was invincible at first because he was following the principles of temperance. But when he conquered the world, he gave in on the principles of temperance. He died because of his own appetite. So this appetite has led to the fall of the kingdom. And you see, the kingdom of, we say the kingdom of Babylon was the second, means the Medo-Persia, the third, then the being the first one, being that of Adam, the Adamic Empire, and then we have Babylonian, and we have them Medo-Persian, then we have here the Grecia, and then we have Rome. If you read of Rome, that's the same thing again, temperance. And even up to the time when we now move to the 1798, where we know there was the end of that man of what? Of sin. So 1798, from then on, we are now into which period? The period of the what? Of the 10 tours. This period of the 10 tours, where we have many kings ruling, which we are now having. We have countries, some countries are weak, some countries are strong. That's the period in which we are in. And the period that then comes next after this period is the period of the kingdom of what? Of God. As we read there, which says, and it shall overturn that crown, overturn it, until and it shall be no more. Meaning the kingdom will go on among the nations and the heathens and having up until the time of the 10 tours. And at this time of the 10 tours, it will then be passed to the what? To the saints. So it is this period when now we are expecting the kingdom to be passed back, that Edenic state of the empire, which men lost in what? In Eden. When it's supposed to be brought back to the people of God, then it is at that particular time that God provides the message of the health reform. So that message of the health reform, therefore, to further say on, was given in which year? In a vision given under the 3 angels' messages. Remember in Revelation chapter 14, we have how many angels? 1, 2, 3. The first angel's message proclaimed by Miller, second angel's message by Miller, then the third angel's message given to Ellen White. So it was under the time of the third angel's message, which was in June 1863, that the aspect of health reform was brought clearly before the people of what? Of God. That were living at that time when God at any time might set up his kingdom. But before he sets up his kingdom, what does he expect of us? He expects us to be back to the Edenic what? Deity. Let's hear what she was given to her in those years. CT 482 paragraph 2.
I've thought for years that I was dependent upon a meat diet for strength.
So this is Ellen White. She is saying from 1844, even from before that, she thought that yes, strength came from eating what? Meat. In as much as people think today, they say meat is good for protein, it's good for this. They think that's where the strength comes from. That's what she also thought. But let's hear. I've eaten
3 meals a day until within a few months. It has been very difficult for me to go from one meal to another without suffering from faintness at the stomach and dizziness of the head. Eating would remove these feelings.
Right.
I seldom allowed myself to eat anything between my regular meals and have made it a practice to often retire without supper.
Right.
But I have suffered greatly for want of food from breakfast to dinner and have frequently fainted. Eating meat removed for the time these faint feelings.
So do you see, she could faint, and she could. This is what she's explaining her experience. So she then found the solution. What was the solution? She was eating what? Meat. This is why in 1858, when someone brought the subject of pork, she actually rebuked the person and said, no, this is not it. There is everything. We will continue to eat. Because she also thought that strength was coming from eating the flesh, because after eating the flesh, she would feel better. But what happened?
I therefore decided that meat was indispensable in my case.
So that's what she said. I thought that meat was indispensable in my case. So in this state of mind, which is the state of many people, people think, I can't live without meat. This is indispensable. This and that. I've done it. They think it's indispensable. So when she was in this state of mind, what did the heaven do? Under the 3 angels' message. Right?
But since the Lord presented before me in June 1863 the subject of meat eating in relation to health, I have left the use of meat.
Do you see what happened? After saying it's indispensable, God then came to her and said, June 1863, you should understand the vision of a health reform. And in that health reform, it meant that no meat eating, no flesh eating in your meal. For a while,
For a while, it was rather difficult to bring my appetite to bread, for which formerly I had but little relish.
So that's very interesting to take note of what happened. So she then had to work hard to improve and make sure the appetite is in line with what God had given, which is the issue of the health reform. So that's when the subject was given. But because when it was given, we are saying that it was closely connected with the third angel's message. Meaning if one say, no, I believe what is written in the Bible, and I believe the three angels mentioned in Revelation chapter 14. If you believe, then you also must believe the vision of health reform. So this vision of the earth from, let's hear, some think that it has nothing to do with the law of God. That's what some people think. It has nothing to do with the law of God. It has nothing to do with sinning. It's just an issue of health. Let's hear what God says. CH 20 paragraph 3.
The health reform is one branch of the great work which is to fit a people for the coming of the Lord.
Do you see why it was given in those years? Because it's fitting people for the coming of the Lord. The disciples thought that that particular time their kingdom would be set. Christ said, no, not for you. Because they were not even ready for the subject that fit people for the coming of the Lord. So those who say we are ready for the coming of the Lord, we see with their diet.
It is as closely connected with the third angel's message as the hand is with the body.
The third angel's message proclaims the commandments of God. Are we together? So if we are saying this health reform is closely connected with the third angel's message, as the hand is the human body, then it means the health reform has to do with the commandments of what? Of God. Otherwise, it cannot be connected with the third angel's message. Let's hear more. Remember, when we have been talking about that aspect of the flesh eating, which we have been talking about how they would kill flesh and do everything, it had to do with the law of what? Of God. So we're being told that even the issue of flesh eating health from is closely connected with the law of what? Of God. Let's see. The law of the Ten Commandments.
The law of 10 commandments has been lightly regarded by men.
Right.
Yet the Lord will not come and punish the transgressors of that law without first sending them a message of warning.
Do you see that? So God will not come and punish us and say, I punish you for eating flesh, I punish you. Before he sends a message to us. He sends a message to us of warning and saying, here you are violating the law of what? Of God.
Men and women cannot violate natural law by indulging deprived appetites and lustful passions without violating the law of God.
Do you see that? So if one is eating meat, you are violating the natural what? Laws. And God is saying, you, in so doing, you're actually also violating the 10 commandments. So there is sin involved in that. Let's hear.
Therefore, he has permitted the light of health reform to shine upon us that we may realize the sinfulness of breaking the laws which he has established in our very
Do you
being.
see why health reform has come? Not for health reasons as people think, but to see the sinfulness of breaking the laws of God. So health reform revealed that the law of God is closely connected with the way we eat. And therefore, the law of God is violated. So that's light under that in his message. She further said this interesting aspect. Do you see what it says? In the light given me years ago, CT 481 paragraph 6.
In the light given me so long ago, 1863, I was shown that intemperance would prevail in the world to an alarming extent and that everyone of the people of God must take an elevated stand in regard to reformation in habits and practices. The Lord presented a general plan before me.
Right.
I was shown that God would give his commandment-keeping people a reformed diet, and that as they received this, their disease and suffering would be greatly lessened.
So do you see, when we talk, for example, we have COVID, we have everything that is in the world, the suffering that is on the earth, was made very clear to you that when we follow the health reform, which he has given in 1863, as we shall see, there is much to then find out in reference to the law of God. This suffering will be what will be eased. Even there is a quotation where she says, in her days, there was the pandemic which was there, the flu pandemic. It says it affected more those who had ate flesh, meat eaters, compared to those who were not eating what? Meat. And we even see the suffering that is there. Even their findings, there are still researches. It is still thought that this virus that is causing so suffering in the world came as a result of what? Of eating flesh, not of eating grains. So all this was given even to here to show the people of God that are waiting for the second advent of what? Of Christ, that they will have this event even before them. So I'm sure you can quickly see from this that it is the issue, or it is the light under the third angel's message. So when people say that the disciples ate flesh, why isn't it Jesus ate flesh? Yes, they ate, and there was no sin in that because there was no specific light given on that subject, as we indicated. That sin is there when light has been what? Neglected, when light has been given. So this is quite clear in the word of what? Of God. I don't know if your question has been answered.
I think it's been attended to. So we would like to understand more why this message comes specifically at the time of the third angel.
Yes, that's a very, very important point. Why specifically at the time of the third angels do we have this? The first point, of course, is very, very clear that we do have the issues that are there when we talk of the disciples. They weren't looking for the second coming of Christ because they were told that they were to look for the falling away, the time of the dark ages. So this message could not be given even to them. Why? Because they're not preparing for the coming of the word of the Lord. So this message comes under the third angel's message. For what purpose? Because it is at this particular time that people are preparing for the coming of Christ. Let's hear yourself speaking of that. CD 380 paragraph 4. Among those
who are waiting for the coming of the Lord, meat eating will eventually be done away. Flesh will cease to form a part of their diet.
Right.
We should ever keep this end in view and endeavor to work steadily toward it.
So why should we put away flesh? Because we are waiting for the coming of the Lord. So only those that are in the period of waiting for the coming of the Lord are the ones that now we have this specific light about the health reform, in which they have to put away meat, what? Eating. Go ahead. It says, is it not? CT 380.
Is it not time that we should aim to dispense with flesh foods? How can those who are seeking to become pure, refined, and holy, that they may have the companionship of heavenly angels, continue to use as food anything that has so harmful an effect on soul and body? How can they take the life of God's creatures that they may consume the flesh as a luxury?
You remember when we were talking the Old Testament, we talked about the aspect of the importance of life. It was easy for them to consume the flesh because we have said when they eat that flesh, it was because they had offered that life to God. But she is saying under the third angel's message, you are now preparing to join the heavenly angels. And we have seen the fruit of the angels' manna. So when you are preparing to join unto those particular level of angels, she is asking, how can you enjoy the flesh of God's creatures when you take for just luxury? So we see this is why under the third angel's message, because we are now about to enter into the field of being joined to the heavenly angels. Therefore, the things are now quite clear. And what does she say is vegetables and fruit. Vegetables and fruits, CT 380.
Vegetables, fruit, and grains should compose our diet. Not an ounce of flesh meat should enter our stomachs.
Right.
The eating of flesh is unnatural. We are to return to God's original purpose in the creation.
Not an ounce should enter. Remember those who allowed an ounce of cows to enter into their mouth. What happened? They died. So this is the event in which we are, where not an ounce of flesh should enter into our stomach. This same revelation was even given by Christ when talking to the people who are looking about at the second advent, waiting for the coming of Christ in Matthew 24, verse 44 to 55. Can you take that one?
Therefore be ye also ready, for in such an hour as ye think not, the Son of Man cometh. Who then is a faithful and wise servant, whom his Lord hath made ruler over his household, to give them meat in due season?
Right.
Blessed is that servant, whom his Lord, when he cometh, shall find so doing. Verily I say unto you, that he shall make him ruler over all his goods. But and if that evil servant shall say in his heart, my Lord delayeth his coming, and shall begin to smite his fellow servants, and to eat and drink with the drunken.
So I'm sure you take note, the people that are waiting for the second advent of Christ, they have a taste on what they eat. They don't eat and drink with their drunkards. Why? Because they are living in the period of the antitypical period of the Day of Atonement. Remember on the Day of Atonement already, we are saying in 1844, what was allowed, appetite was governed on the Day of Atonement. You're not supposed to eat anything. So that antitypical period of atonement is also coming to us and saying, you need to govern your appetite. But in what way? The message of the health reform teaches us how to govern appetite. We don't eat and drink with the drunkards. The drunkards enjoy meat. They drink, they eat meat. But the people of God, they don't drink, but what do? They eat meat. So they are now joining with the drunkards. And God is saying, if we have that aspect you are having it, then we are not ready for the second advent. So before the second advent, we have therefore the third angel's message to prepare us so that we don't eat and drink with the drunken. So there is much to say on this subject I'm sure we'll cover it on our part 2 on this point, to actually cover clearly then whether the scriptures show this event taking place, and we also do they show exactly what law is broken and one is what flesh. That second part, part 2, will cover that aspect. We invite people to actually come into that one. It's a very interesting point, because here we've shown when the light was given and why it was given, that it has to do with the commandments of God, but we haven't shown clearly what it has to do, which commandments of what? Of God.
I'd like to say thank you and God bless you for being with us, and that we've gone through, following right from the very beginning, from creation to see what was the diet of men, and all the way through to see how we get as far as having a message in our time, warning us that it's time to let go of flesh eating. We look forward to finding out further what exactly are the laws which are being broken, or what is the sin being committed when flesh is being eaten. We look forward to meeting again at another time to continue these studies, and we would like to say may God bless the reading of His word and bless all our viewers as well.